time we've been waiting for. It's the prepared speeches. Our first speaker is fairly new to the club and has competed for roles in auditions. She is giving her Icebreaker speech today, titled, "I wanted to be a writer, however, I didn't like to read." Please welcome Tonya Holloway.
Good afternoon, fellow Toastmasters and guests. Climbing on the counter to reach a bowl, pouring the tasteless Cheerios and drenching it with sugar, eating with pleasure while watching some classic Looney Tunes, then heading to the garage to retrieve my dirt bike and hitting the pavement proud for some adventure. That was a good Saturday to me. On the other hand, my sister, my nerdy sister, would rather avoid the Texas sun and bury her head in a book. Her knack for always doing exceptionally well in school highlighted the fact that I was being a little lazy. There were many times I found myself trying to offer her my domestic services for a week in return for her not showing the report card for at least another day. But despite my attempts, the anticipation for her showing off outweighed my offers. The closest I ever came to reading a book on a Saturday as a young girl was my mother throwing one at my head, aiming for my head in a desperate attempt to further the love of academics into my brain cells. It didn't work. The latter part of my elementary school days, I was bused to a school across town, and instead of excelling with improvements of everything new, I lagged behind. This infuriated my parents. The grades were not due to a lack of understanding, but rather a lack of interest. See, watching Reginald roll his stomach like a snake was way more amazing. Over the years of school, I can name all the books that received my undivided attention. And the three are as follows. Ramona the Pest by Judy Blume, The Boxcar Kids by Gertrude Warner, and The Great Gatsby by S. Scott Fitzgerald. That about sums up elementary, middle, and high school. I raced through college to start an adventurous, independent life. A life absent of an abundance of mandatory reading. Oh sure, I read a couple of good ones in my young adult years, but the first page had to be a gripper or it was back to the shelf. Ironically, I later became a teacher in the Dallas-Fort Worth Independent School Districts. Initially, I started as a substitute teacher, but constantly kept being asked to stay for the remainder of the year at various schools. I thought to myself, either they are truly desperate to ask me to stay, or I might actually be good at this. Turns out that I enjoyed the Rugrats, and I demanded excellence on top of having fun in the classroom. Being a kid who always found school boring, I was able to relate and identify with children of the same mentality. I was able to uplift, encourage, and care for the classroom no one wanted to teach. I began to excel in the field of education until that devil dog appeared. Needless to say, my career in education was put on hold. We married, and I got stuck in the middle of a town that barely had its own dot on the map. It was then that the idea of writing a children's book popped into my head. A desire to relieve myself from the anxieties of extreme boredom was my goal. I found the task simple and amusing because I was drawing from familiar stories, my stories. Embellished a bit here and there, but nevertheless, they became stories of my best experiences and some of the most embarrassing experiences on those early childhood Saturday mornings. It was a creative outlet I desperately needed, considering the only live performances and cultural activities I was going to be seeing for the next 3 years was my 4-year-old's ballet class. Oh. Since 2002, I've entered into a long, tedious, red tape-lined, complicated, and sometimes disappointing investigation of how to crack open the door of publishing. It can be a bit discouraging at times. However, I've discovered something about myself. I now, more than ever, enjoy reading. I'm like Sam I Am in Dr. Seuss's Goodnight. I will read in a box, in a house, forget the mouse. But on a train, in a plane, in the air, I don't care. Whether it's a bedtime book for my children or a fiction that transports me into another time or place, I will read anywhere. I've had some success since my first steps into professional writing, and this has motivated me to stick with it. I'm a storyteller, so in between refereeing the fights and answering the continuous question, what's for dinner, I write when I get the time, I share it when I can, and one day I hope to put my own book in my children's hands. This is just